Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Right now, Ultimate Masters booster boxes are available at the fantastic price of $270 when you use this promo code, and shipping is free on this and any order over $100. Check out the description below for more details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 1 of our 6-part Ultimate Masters full set review, where today we're going to look at all of the white cards and some of the multicolor cards that are within the set. Now, this is a Master set, so a couple of things to keep in mind. First off, all the cards are good in some way. We're going to be talking about how good they are in relationship to each other. And secondly, these are all reprints, so we know what they do in the formats where they're currently legal. This is going to be more of a limited set review, so if you're planning on playing some draft or sealed with this video series will help you out a little bit. Quickly before we get started though, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support what we do here at the channel. You'll find our Patreon page down there, and you're also going to find links to products on Amazon, including Ultimate Masters. Anything you purchase through those links will get a small percentage for the channel. Finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers, and they still have a few boxes of Ultimate Masters left. Using the promo code, they're only $270 shipped, which is a pretty good deal. So if you are still looking, you might want to check that out. But as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to all the viewers. Y'all make the channel what it is. So thank you very much. But let's get into it. We're going to go through each card one at a time, and one thing you're going to notice as we look at the cards today, unlike a lot of the standard sets where they really hold your hand when it comes to draft archetypes, you're not going to see that today. You're not going to see big signpost cards at uncommon in the 2 colors. You're not going to see cards that almost feel like they need to be in a certain deck. There's a lot more flexibility here, and you can go 2, 3, maybe even 4 colors, and any variety actually could be very powerful just depending on what cards you actually have. The mechanics all work really well with each other, no matter what you're doing, but we'll talk about some of the best strategies for each card as we go through, and we'll begin with Ancestors Chosen. This is actually a decent card. It seems expensive at first considering it costs 7, and you can get a lot of really good cards if you're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 mana in this set. But this one is not something you want to overlook. It's an uncommon, so you can get a hold of it over a lot of the rares in the set. It's a 4/4 first striker, which is actually pretty decent and can tip the board state. And then the fact that you can gain life based on what's in your graveyard is actually pretty impressive. By the time you're ready to play this card, you should have a lot of cards in your graveyard. Even if you're just playing Fair Magic, let alone if you're actually playing Orzhov or Azorius, which present a lot of opportunities to discard or mill. You have the potential for a big life gain when you play this card, and it's a decent creature. Angelic Renewal. This only costs 2, so it's not a huge commitment, but I'll be honest with you, there's just a lot of really powerful cards in this set, and I don't see myself playing this one all that often. I do like the fact that it protects the creature that's most important to you. So if you do have a creature that is maybe your win condition creature, especially in maybe blue-white, which is more controlling, you might not have as many creatures, and you have a big flyer that you're really hoping to just ride to victory, then this is going to hopefully give you a better chance of doing that. So I could see playing it in a build like that, but many builds I might just skip this one. This does interact with Evoke in an interesting way though, and that is something to consider since there are Evoke cards in the set, but I don't know if that alone would provide enough value here. Containment Priest. Okay, if this was a 2/2 for 2 with flash and it said nothing else, I would actually consider playing this more often than not because it's a really nice curve filler. Remember, you got a lot of powerful cards in this set. Don't get blinded by that. You don't want to go too top heavy with all these amazing cards. You want to make sure you still stick to your curve, especially sealed and draft decks are going to need to do that. You don't want to lose the game on turn 4 or 5 because you didn't play anything. So simply, something like this is just good on its own. The drawback is if you want to dip into the graveyard, this is going to hurt you because this affects everybody at the table. So remember that. It does have flash, so you can surprise your opponent. So going into this, let's say I decide to main deck this. If I don't have a way to reanimate, which will be probably not likely as you'll see in a few moments here, if I don't though, okay, sure, this is a great 2-drop for me. If I do, it still could be okay under the right circumstances, but I might want to have a sack outlet or something like that, so if I have to get rid of it on the fly, I can. But the flash is also really cool. You can just hang on to it, keep it in your hand until you really need it, and then you can surprise your opponent, and that's kind of awesome too. If I'm not playing it in my main deck for whatever reason, and my opponent is really going to the graveyard pretty consistently, of course, bring it in for game 2 or game 3. Conviction. Okay, you're going to see in a few moments, Heroic is a thing in white. And I think Heroic is going to be best in Boros colors. If you're playing some red and white, and we're going to get to red later in the week, you're going to notice that there's a lot of small creatures. You're kind of going wide. You're trying to put the pressure on. Nothing unusual for those colors. The Heroic actually kind of pushes that strategy a little bit, though, with cards like this that can activate it. This is a cheap way to activate Heroic. It also can be returned to your hand for just 1 white mana, so you can activate Heroic, hopefully, again and again throughout the course of the game. The card itself isn't all that amazing. +1/+3 is fine, but nothing incredible. And if the creature does get destroyed or something, you do have the opportunity, as long as you have a white mana, to return this to your hand and still protect it, which is pretty nice. Is this for every build? No, of course not. But I would consider playing this definitely in the Boros strategy, because I do think Heroic will be best there. It could also be good in Selesnya, where you're going to have some hexproof creatures, and the auras, which are very heavy in white, which you'll see as we go through, are going to play an even bigger role in that deck. But this is something that you'll play at least a portion of the time and be really happy with. Dawn Charm. Great card. A lot of versatility. It's real cheap. Instant speed. I could see maybe it doesn't always make your cut depending on your builds, but most of the time I think I'm going to play this, quite honestly. It just gives you so many options. If your opponent tries to target you with something, you can counter it. Regenerating a creature could be really good, especially with Heroic. And preventing all combat damage that would be dealt this turn could also surprise your opponent, and maybe you could even steal a game with some crackback. Yeah, I'll play one of these and be pretty happy with it. Daybreak Cornet. Okay, so I mentioned auras are a pretty big deal, especially in the Selesnya colors. You're going to see a lot of the Umbras, which of course have the totem armor, which is fantastic. This is going to play really well into that strategy. The problem is this card can be inconsistent. If you don't have enough auras in your deck, then you're definitely going to want to skip it, because it's basically a dead card. That's no good. But if you have enough, especially with Heroic and auras mixing together, this could be very, very strong for you. So know your deck. If you feel like you're going to have a target for it, go for it. If not, you might want to skip it. This is a rare, and remember, when you're talking draft or sealed, you're not going to see a lot of these cards. But if you're lucky enough to get it and you're in the right deck, go for it, because it will be fantastic. Emancipation Angel. This is a real solid card for, say, a Boros build that's trying to keep the pressure on, even though it does maybe slow you down a little bit from time to time, because you do have to return a permanent from the battlefield to your hand, but we'll talk about mitigating that in a second. It's also very good maybe in the Azorius build, where you're being more controlling and you just need to get damage across with some flyers. It will be great there. But here's the thing that you want to remember. That drawback doesn't have to be a drawback. Maybe I have a creature that has a great enters battlefield effect. I get to play it again later and get that effect all over again. That's kind of nice. Or simply, maybe I just have 3 lands. I tap those 3 lands, I play this, I return one of those lands to my hand, I replay it, and now it's untapped. There's a lot of ways around this. If it slows you down, though, it slows you down. It's still a really good card. Getting 3/3 power toughness in the air on turn 3, potentially, is really strong. Fate's Fetters. I love this card a lot when I play white. Awesome cube card. I've got to cast this many times playing cube, but I'll tell you, for 4 mana, you get this effect that can attach itself to any permanent and basically shut down activated abilities. If it happens to be a creature, it also can attack or block, which is nice, by the way, kind of like a pacifism. But activated abilities can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. And you gain 4 life on top of it, which is not irrelevant, considering this does cost 4 mana. This is not that bad for everything you're getting. It gives you versatility in white that you don't normally have. You can deal with problems that white sometimes has trouble dealing with. Fantastic card. I would first pick this as a common in a lot of packs, I think, in draft. It's that good. Fiend Hunter. Another way to just keep the pressure on. Now, this can only target a creature, but it does get that creature out of the way for as long as you can hang on to the Fiend Hunter. And again, in Boros, especially when you're trying to keep the pressure on, they'll be really good. Control builds, maybe Azorius or Orzhov, this will be fantastic there. Honestly, this is going to be good no matter what your build is. Play this, you'll be happy with it. God's Willing. This is an awesome card. Now, you don't have to overdo it in a draft. It's a common, like 1 of in a deck I think is good enough typically. Maybe 2 in some builds. But I think 1 is going to be just fine. You're going to be happy with it. It's going to surprise your opponent. You don't have to overdo it. You'll have a big moment with this card, trust me. So it's just 1, instant speed, giving one of your creatures protection from the color of your choice till end of turn, and you get to scry 1, which is awesome too. And that versatility from protecting it from a color is awesome, because it could be a pinpoint removal spell you're protecting it from on the fly, or maybe you just need to get damage across and your opponent only has green creatures or something. Now you can give it pro green and just rumble. That's kind of awesome. I just love this card. It always works out well for me. Heliod's Pilgrim, great if you have a lot of auras. If you don't have a lot of auras in your deck, skip this one, obviously. But if you do, this lets you tutor up one of those auras, and that could be really strong for you. Especially, again, in Selesnya, there's hexproof creatures and also some other heroic creatures. Auras just become that much more powerful there. But auras can work really anytime you're in white, and if you have enough of them, this will be a fine card for you. This is also a good enters the battlefield effect in those situations, so remember Emancipation Angel from a few moments ago, and there's also a flicker effect coming up. Keep that in mind. Hero of Iroas. Here's some more enchantment love. Aura spells you cast will cost 1 less to cast. Nothing wrong with that. And it's got heroic, so whenever you cast a spell targeting this, it gets a +1/+1 counter. And you know what? It's a 2/2 for 2. This is a bear with upside. Sign me up all day long. And it's an uncommon. That's actually pretty awesome. You're going to need those 2 drops, like I said earlier. Don't forget about those. This is an awesome one. The more abilities on the 2 drop, especially in this set, the happier you're going to be. I do think heroic will be better sometimes in Boros, and I do think the auras will be better sometimes in Selesnya. But again, there's so many opportunities to cross over strategies in this set that if you have the cards to back this up, go ahead and play it. And even if you don't, it's still a 2/2 for 2. Hyena Umbra. Okay, here's one of the Umbras with Totem Armor. This is really solid. Giving something +1/+1 in first strike, also being able to trigger heroic for just 1 mana. And if the creature's going to be destroyed, you get to just lose the Totem Armor and keep the creature. These are very powerful auras. Again, think about how good this is going to be with a hexproof creature in Selesnya or something like that. But regardless, very strong card. Acacian Crier. Okay, here's one of the few discard outlets that white does have, so you want to pay attention to this card. It is a common. There's a lot of reanimation in white. We haven't gotten to it yet, but there's a lot coming up. You could actually just be in white and have a reanimation plan going on. But you need a discard outlet at least. This will do that for you. Now, reanimation is going to work a little bit better if you're in a color combination like maybe blue-white, because you can mill yourself quite a bit there. And there's also discard outlets in blue. Same thing with white-black. So you want to have another color to support that, I think, in white. But there's a lot of powerful reanimation going on just within the color. Now, if you're not on that game plan of reanimation, would you ever play this and not use it as a discard outlet? Yeah, I think sometimes you would, because it does turn extra cards that you don't need or can't use later into board presence, like extra lands, for example. Boros does not want to hit too many lands too quickly. You can turn those lands into 1/1 creatures. That's going to be awesome for the Boros build. It lets you keep going wide, keep the pressure on. And later on, if you're in a board stall, this will be fantastic. So even if you're not trying to do anything broken with this card, it's still very, very playable. Lotus I Mystics. This is common for the first time, so it is now actually legal in Pauper, so that's something to remember. The card itself in Limited, yeah, it's okay. 3/2 for 4, those are not very good stats, but it does have prowess, and also when it enters the battlefield, you get to return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand, which is pretty good in this color. So is it worth playing for those abilities? Yeah, if you think the abilities are going to do enough for you. For example, I'm in Azorius color, so I have some extra non-creature spells, and the prowess becomes better. Yeah, okay, it might be good. Or I just have a lot of auras, which is very possible if I'm in white generally, but Selesnya especially could be more important. If that's the case, yeah, play it, you'll be happy with it. If not, if you don't feel like those abilities are doing enough for you, definitely skip it. Mammoth Umbra, another card that is new to Pauper. And it gives Vigilance, which isn't my favorite when it comes to some of these Umbras, but still, +3/+3, and Totem Armor is hard to argue with for 5. Very, very good aura spell here to play. Martyr Sands. This card can actually gain you a lot of life, but you have to be pretty heavy in white. There's times where I'm not going to play this. For example, if I don't have a lot of white in my deck. If I'm maybe a Boros build that's 70-30 red-white or something like that, sure, skip it. And if you feel like gaining life isn't going to be relevant for what you're doing necessarily, then maybe you just try to not dilute your deck by putting this in and try to stick to your game plan. Very possible. However, if I'm not running this in my main deck for whatever reason, bring it in if your opponent has an aggressive build. If you're getting beat down by Boros early on in like turn 2, turn 3, turn 4, you're going to want this later in the game to try to catch up. So even if you're not using it, it definitely has some utility perhaps out of the sideboard. But I could see main decking this as long as you have a lot of white in your deck. Okay, I promised some graveyard shenanigans. Here we go. Miraculous Recovery. This is an uncommon notice, so you're going to be able to get your hands on this. Instant speed, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and gets a +1/+1 counter to boot. Nothing wrong with that for 5 mana, right? It's going to help you reanimate. Now, like I said, white doesn't have a lot of ways to get the things in your graveyard, but other colors like blue and black will help with that pretty significantly. And even so, we did see a common discard outlet, so it is possible, even if you weren't in those color combinations, you could still make this work. This is also great with the Eldrazi Titans, if you're lucky enough to open one of those, which will be rare, but if it happens, then you can get the Titan out of the graveyard before the shuffle effect happens, which is awesome. And remember, you could play with a green creature in a white-black build if you think you have enough ways to get it into the graveyard and reanimate it. Phalanx Leader. Okay, one of my favorite heroic cards. At uncommon too, so these will be floating around. Not a great startup cost. 2 white for a 1/1 isn't super impressive, but once it is on the battlefield, it can do some work for you. Any spell you cast that targets it, not only does it get a +1/+1 counter, but all your creatures get a +1/+1 counter. That is phenomenal. You don't want to play this on turn 2. This is not a turn 2 play. You don't throw this out there and hope it doesn't get blown up. What you do is you wait until you have some creatures on the battlefield and maybe even something that can actually target this right away. Play this for 2, then play something else like an aura on it, and just go to town. Fantastic card here. It's going to be awesome in Boros, but it's just an awesome card generally. Rally the Peasant. Speaking of Boros, this is going to be awesome there. As you can tell, the flashback cost being red, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, that's where you should play it, but it's also good in other builds. Like, is this bad if I have some flyers and Azorius and I just want to pump them? No, of course not. Is it bad if I have some tall trample creature with a bunch of stuff stuck to it, a bunch of auras in green and white? No, it will be good there too. But it's really going to impress when you go wide, and Boros is going to be the best at doing that. If you don't feel like you have enough creatures, maybe you're in more of a controlling build and you want to stick to control cards, then of course skip this one, but some builds will appreciate it. Repel the Darkness. Okay, you look at this card, you might say to yourself, this is Ultimate Masters. This is a pretty good card, but is it really ever going to make my build? You know what? Maybe sometimes it won't, but don't underestimate the versatility here. For 3 mana, instant speed, it cantrips, and it can do a lot of different things. It can tap a couple creatures to protect you and slow things down if you're trying to be more controlling. It can tap a couple creatures to help you push across damage if you're trying to be more aggressive. And if you have heroic creatures, guess what? At the end of your opponent's turn, you could cast this on a couple of your creatures and get 2 heroic triggers. Or even do this after blockers are chosen as a combat trick. That's kind of sweet, right? So if I have heroic creatures in my deck, I'm probably going to play a copy of this. I just love the versatility involved here. If I don't have that many, maybe it makes my cut, maybe it doesn't. Resurrection. From the original Magic set, Alpha Beta Unlimited, fantastic card here. It's a sorcery this time, not an instant, but guess what? It's a common. And as a matter of fact, this is the first time it's at common, so this is also entering Pauper. But when it comes to limited, if you got stuff that you want to reanimate, this is going to do the trick, and it should be pretty easy to get a hold of. Revel Arc, really good in this color. It's a rare, you're not going to see it all that much, but all these little creatures we've been looking at with Heroic, this brings them back. You can evoke it too, if that is the best thing to do. Although I think most of the time in Limited, the 4/3 flyer is just going to be a little bit better than just playing this for evoke, which costs more than the regular casting cost. So depending on the situation, you can do either or, which is nice. But the cards do go directly from the graveyard to the battlefield, which is awesome. Now these have to be 2 smaller creatures, obviously, power 2 or less, but we've seen a lot of small creatures that are very good with Heroic today. So there's some great targets in the set, definitely. And aside from that, a 4/3 flyer could be great in like an Azorius build if you just need to push damage across while you're controlling the board, or really just anywhere. 4/3 flyers for 5 and limited, you know what? They tend to be pretty decent. Rhea Dawnbringer. Okay, another rare here. Again, you won't see a ton of it. And this one's a little expensive to cast. 3 white and 6. Not every deck's going to be able to handle that. If you don't have enough white in your deck, for example, it's not very splashable. However, if you can get this out, and one way to get it out is reanimation. You could discard it with Acacian Crier, then you could go ahead and play Resurrection, that'd be super sweet. And once it's in play, a 4/6 flyer, that's really good on its own, but now you're taking creatures back every turn from the graveyard directly to play. Your opponent's probably losing if they're not doing something about this card pretty quick. Rodham Unicorn, you know what this is? It's a bear with upside, 2/2 for 2, it's at common, you'll be able to grab these things, great for your curve. And if my opponent happens to have an enchantment at some point, well, wonderful. Even if they don't, I'll still probably play this most of the time. And if I'm not for some reason, I'll bring it in if my opponent shows me some enchantments in game 1. Rune Halo. This is a sideboard card in limited for me, just simply because game 1, I don't know what my opponent's playing. Sure, later in the game, I might have an idea of a card to name, but for the most part, I just think this card will be better off coming out of the sideboard. The card that almost beat me in game 1, yeah, okay, I know what I'm going to name, right, in game 2 or game 3. So it's going to be good for you there. Another rare, you won't see it a whole lot. Sigil of the New Dawn. This is okay. It costs 4, which is a little expensive for an enchantment that's not really doing anything on its own, and I don't like that, especially in such a powerful set. Then I need to have open mana when a creature dies to be able to get any use out of it, which may or may not be the case. Now, later on in the game, and like a board stall especially, this will probably be great because I can get my stuff back. It goes to hand, not to the battlefield. so I will have to cast it again, but as long as I have a lot of mana towards the end of the game, it might not be a problem for me, even if I'm using the activation cost as well here. But with that being said, I think that's a very narrow situation. Maybe I would sideboard it in if my first game was super grindy, but I think most of the time I'll find better things. This is another card though that interacts well with Evoke, and that might be reason enough to run it from time to time. Spear Cavalry. This is another card that's new to Pauper, first time in common. It's fine and limited. A 2/2 flying first striker for 5. It might not always make your cut, just depends on what your 5, 6, 7 drops look like. But if you need something that's solid, this is pretty solid. It's a little fragile with 2 toughness, but imagine throwing a totem armor aura on this thing. Yeah, it could be good. Definitely going to be better in some builds than others. Spirit Karen. One thing I want to point out about this card whenever a player discards a card. It doesn't have to just be you or just the opponent. If anyone does it, you can pay the white and get the flyer. That's actually kind of sweet. If you're an Orzhov, for example, you know you're going to be discarding a lot of cards as the game goes on. You have that reanimation strategy going on. This could be really good for you. Definitely main deckable. Even though it costs 3 and doesn't do anything on its own. I don't love that, but I still think it's very playable in certain builds. If I'm not planning on discarding a lot, then I probably skip this. But if my opponent's doing it, remember it's in your sideboard. Sublime Archangel. Very powerful rare here. As a matter of fact, this used to be a mythic. Imagine you're playing a game with a lot of small creatures, like a Boros build, and then all of a sudden, everything gets gummed up. You can't get that last damage across. Okay, I play this 4/3 flyer with Exalted, and other creatures you control have Exalted. This is going to have a big attack next turn. Or maybe I have a creature that is unblockable or has trample or something. Something's going to have a big turn, hopefully, right? So this could be very, very powerful. Obviously, I could list some scenarios where it's going to be better, but if you get this, play it. It will be phenomenal. Swift Reckoning. This is an awesome removal spell for white. Spell Mastery, sure, it might be a little bit better in, say, Azorius or something like that. But at the end of the day, 2 instants or sorceries in your graveyard really isn't that hard no matter what you're doing. Destroy tap target creature, even if you can't use Flash, is still pretty good. Not as good, but if you have to just use this on something that already attacked you, well, so be it. You still got rid of it for 2 mana. And if you can use Flash, then wonderful, it's even better. Tethmost High Priest. This is another card that's new to Pauper, actually, and it's another heroic card at common, and another one that brings small things back from the graveyard directly into play. That's actually kind of cool. So this time, convert a mana cost 2 or less it can target. And if you have small creatures, we've been looking at them all day, this will be a phenomenal inclusion in your deck, no doubt. Wall of Reverence. Another rare here, so again, you won't see a ton of it, but it's a real good control card. I mean, a 1/6 defender flyer for 4, it just gums up the game, especially good in Azorius builds, maybe some of the Orzhov builds as well. And you also gain life depending on what creatures you have in play. You're at least gaining 1 life a turn because this is in play, but hopefully you're gaining more. So those decks, especially the more aggressive ones, really kind of get stuck with this on the battlefield. This alone could take an aggressive deck just right out of a game. Do I play this in every deck? No, not necessarily. If I'm trying to be more aggressive, I don't want to water things down, for example. But if my opponent is aggressive and I'm not using this for some reason, again, just bring it in. Wandering Champion. This is also new to Pauper. So generally, 3/1s for 2 are not bad in limited. They're not amazing, but sometimes they do trade up and you get a nice profitable combat out of it. Other times, if your opponent stumbles, you might get 3/6 damage across. Nothing wrong with that, right? This one also has an ability. You can rummage if you can get damage across on your opponent and you have a blue or red permanent in play, right? So if that's the case and I'm playing blue and or red with this, then it gets a little better there as well. But most of the time, I don't think players are going to let that happen, but it might lead to a profitable block for you, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. So do I play this at the end of the day? I think aggressive builds, I would definitely consider it. Again, probably Boros more than anything. Or if I have a lot of auras where I felt like I could buff this thing and feel pretty confident, then yeah, I'll play it and be pretty happy with it. Other times, if I'm in Azorius or maybe Orzhov or something more controlling, I might skip it. Wingsteed Rider. Here's another heroic creature for you. A 2/2 for 3, but it has flying, so that's pretty good. And you know what? In limited, sometimes you'll pay the extra for flying and be pretty happy with it. And you just need that evasion occasionally. Again, control builds will appreciate that evasion for sure. And the more aggressive builds will too, because this is a small creature with heroic that could get bigger as time goes on. So ultimately, yeah, I'm going to be pretty happy to play this probably most of the time, regardless of the build. I don't think I need to say this will maybe be best in Boros because you have those small creatures, you're going wide, red has a lot of haste. It just helps contribute to that pressure. Let's move on to some multicolor cards, looking at a few of the Azorius ones first. Reviving Vapors. Now, this is interesting because it's an instant, which is good for these colors that are trying to be a little more controlling. Maybe you're hanging on to a counterspell or something like that. Then you can use this ability to help you populate your graveyard. And on top of that, you get a card, a little bit of card selection. It's kind of a cantrip, but you're selecting out of the top 3, which makes it better. And hopefully even gain some life. So it does a lot for 4 mana. It's actually very good in that particular style of deck. And it is another way to populate your graveyard, which could be really important for reanimation later. Blue's going to contribute more to that. We'll see that tomorrow. Sovereigns of Lost Alara. Okay, this is another Exalted card. Although Exalted is kind of sprinkled into the set. It's not really a major thing, but it is nice to have when you have it. This does not fly, even though the picture makes you feel like it should. It's a 4/5 though. Pretty substantial creature for 6, I guess. But the real appeal is whenever a creature you control attacks alone, you get to search for an aura and put it right on that creature directly at that moment without paying the casting cost. So it does lead to some big turns as long as you have auras in your deck. If you have some good auras, play this, you'll be happy. If you don't, you're probably going to skip it. It's not doing enough for 6 on its own. But with auras, it could be very, very strong. Those Azorius control decks, they might just have a few flyers or a few different creatures that are trying to push across the damage. This just makes those creatures more potent. Plume Veil. Okay, this one's hybrid mana, so it doesn't have to be in an Azorius deck. Keep that in mind. But it's very good in a control build. That flash can really surprise an opponent. They could be coming in with like a 3/3 flyer feeling real good about life, and that could end really fast. And even if you don't necessarily surprise them at any time, it's still a very solid way to just gum up the game. Very good card in those more controlling builds. Turn to Mist. This is a hybrid card, and this is the flicker effect I was mentioning earlier. Now, it is one of those slow flicker effects, so the card comes back at the next end step. Keep that in mind. It's not one of those quick ones. But you can target any creature, so it can be your creature, an opponent's creature. That's kind of nice. So it does give you a lot of versatility at instant speed, and I could maybe use it on a creature of mine that has a good enters the battlefield effect. Or I could use it on an opponent's creature if I need to just clear a path to get damage across. Or if I'm on the defensive, I can get rid of my opponent's creature at least for a turn and buy myself some time. So you don't need to go crazy with multiple copies of these necessarily, but like one in your deck I think will be good. Angel of Despair. Now, this would be a good card to flicker. Nothing bad to say about this card. I mean, a 5/5 flyer when it enters the battlefield, destroy target permanent, and that includes anything, even lands. Now, the casting cost might be tough for some decks. 2 black, 2 white, and 3. It's not very splashable, obviously, but if your deck can cast this, play it, you'll be real happy. Beckon Apparition, another hybrid card here, and this is a good sideboard card. I don't see myself main decking it, but I don't know. There's a lot of graveyard shenanigans in this set, so we'll have to see how it plays, but I think I just pull it out of the sideboard when I need it. If my opponent's big on reanimation, or just pulling cards out of the graveyard back to hand, or what have you, then this could be good for me. I could find value not only stopping what they're doing at instant speed, but also giving myself a 1/1 flyer. Yeah, it's pretty good for 1 mana, and it doesn't matter if you're playing white or black, you're able to work this into more builds, which is always nice. Alright, with that being said, that concludes the first part of our full set review for Ultimate Masters. Tomorrow, we're going to be back with all of the blue cards, so I will see you then. But until next time, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.